Okay, wow, this chapter of My Hero Academia was pretty heavy, and it's for that reason that it was right up my alley because I love breaking down these sorts of chapters. With the last chapter, we got an even better look at the horrible state heroic society has been left in following the events of the war and various prison breaks across the country. I mean, civilians are at the point of facing villains themselves despite their lack of combat training thanks to the spread of black market support items. And heroes, whether they be in the top 10 or not, are hated by the public. And with so many now quitting their jobs, the question of what exactly a hero really is has been on the rise. Just as the man who once posed this very question oh so long ago, Stain, walked free yet again. Meanwhile, we would find Endeavor hospitalized, recounting his reunion with his dear boy Toyah, the mass murdering villain. An ordeal that left the man's eyes flooded with tears to the point where even when observed by his children, he couldn't hold them back. But just as he was feeling sorry for himself, his wife, whom he hadn't seen in nearly 10 years, Ray, would emerge intent on talking about their villainous son. To start this one, we open up with the binding of the arranged marriage between Endeavor and Ray, and this conversation felt like someone trying to sell off luxury goods, not a discussion about a pairing of two people. However, in looking at her, Endeavor considered Ray to be a woman like ice. She was rather docile and wasn't emotive at all. In fact, she didn't even make eye contact with the man. And although she knew entirely that this was a marriage based on quirks, she had no quarrel as she was apparently willing to do so for the sake of her family. A prestigious family at that. However, there was a moment where that veil of ice began to thin just a little bit. This being a story we had heard over 100 chapters ago, as she really loved a particular type of flower, enough to smile and call them beautiful. And in seeing her like this, Endeavor thought to himself just how strong she was. Yet he feared that if he so much as touched her, she might have melted away. Which, again, like the last chapter, is hilarious to me considering we have this man in 4K putting his hands on her, but okay, Mr. Hero. But in the present, Endeavor was just flabbergasted. He had no idea how to handle seeing her and ended up asking something stupid like, "How are you?" when clearly she wasn't so great and that's the whole reason she came. Following this, however, we'd receive the perspective of Dabi, who wasn't in the best shape. He clearly went overboard as he couldn't feel anything, and just as Endeavor believed, Dabi knew the #1 hero wouldn't die so easily. And even if he wanted to, Dabi would not let that happen apparently, which I find to be an interesting concept. But ultimately, it would be time for Endeavor to face the public, and so he was really excited to see the misery on his father's face, as this was everything he had been working towards for so very long. And if nothing else, I don't believe Dabi is going to get the satisfaction he desires in this case. I think that following this conversation with his family, Endeavor will be made to toughen up, even through the criticism, because at the end of the day, he told the people to watch him. Really and truly, no amount of words or apologies can make up for what has already happened. As a hero with the most resolved cases ever, this is where he should, in theory, be able to put in the most work. And hey, maybe his hero agency falls apart because people don't want to be led by him, or even be heroes in this broken world. But I'm not giving up on that Batman connotation I made previously, because I believe that even if alone, Endeavor will put in that work when it comes down to it. Dabi would then say the names of his family members, telling them to watch him from the pits of hell, as a trail of crimson blood would pool and run from his eyes as if like a single tear. But before going on, I would like to take a look at how he addresses each of them. For Endeavor, he uses the man's legal name. For Ray, he goes with Mom. For his siblings, it's a bit softer and more familiar, but with Shoto, it's more foreign and cold. From there, we flash back to the Todoroki household as Toyah was absolutely livid that his father wouldn't train with him, even on his day off, something he had been waiting for forever now, as his father would reiterate to him that they weren't training for his own good. And following this, we would find ourselves in a doctor's office discussing the case of Toyah, And again, as we've been told several times over, although he inherited a fire quirk, his body is more like his mother's and better suited for the cold as opposed to having a resistance to fire. Now, before anyone tries to pull a stolen quirk theory on you guys like they have with Deku for ages, this hospital is not Jakku General. It is not the one the insidious doctor had been operating out of for years, and Endeavor never once displayed any hint of recognition, so cut that out from now. This doctor, however, would tell these two parents that designing children was kinda messed up and that they'd better quit from now. But of course, Endeavor is the type of guy who'd go to the doctor's office only to not listen to the doctor. And at that, Endeavor is one sick puppy, man. This guy is a different breed of hater. God forbid I ever have a hater on the level of this man. All Might saved several towns and of course got recognition for it. And this man Endeavor is over here just punching the air, telling his boy Toyah that he can surpass All Might. We would then get a conversation between Toyah and little Fuyumi. Toyah didn't care if he got a little burnt, as he felt he knew his body better than anyone else. Fuyumi would then express that she doesn't like seeing her older brother hurt, which would then piss him off even more, because I can imagine from his perspective, a hero isn't someone people should be concerned about. And furthermore, this was a dream his father had already sold him, a fire that had been ignited from the very beginning. We would then find ourselves with a conversation between Rei and Endeavor. Endeavor wanted to try again for another child, but Rei argued that it was too cruel, that Toyah was already old enough to figure out why they exist to begin with, as Endeavor would then say that no matter how much he tries, the kid continues to come to him with more burns on him each day, that besides his fire, he inherited Endeavor's foolishness as well. The intensity of fire, if you will. That if they want him to give up on being a hero, they have no choice but to crush him in this way. Because ultimately, Toyah cannot surpass All Might. And what kind of parental course of action is that? That is just... what? I mean, this is just so sad, man. Natsuo was born and Toyah knew exactly why. He himself was a reject, a failure. But as we all know, this wouldn't be the last child, as Endeavor's envy was not yet satisfied. And at the same time, you could see the subtle shift in Rei's eyes. I mean, how good is Horikoshi at conveying emotions here? She knew what this was doing to Toyah, but she turned a blind eye. And eventually, Shoto was born. And again, look at the expressions here. I mean, this art, guys, this is really something. And also, would you look at that, by the time Shoto was born, Toyah's hair was already completely white. So to the fan transitioning from the anime who have sworn up and down that his hair is supposed to be red, again, as we've said before, this is just one of those things that the anime continues to deviate from for whatever reason. We would then see Toyah training in the snow alone, speaking to himself aloud as if talking to his father. Pretty much saying that he's even better than Shoto, as his flames are just so strong. And in the end, he didn't want to be discarded. He wanted his father to care about him again. But when he went to him, he was yelled at instead. He was told to quit his dream of being a hero, a dream given to him by the man now trying to take it away. He was told to play with his siblings and make friends at school, to discover worlds beyond heroics. That eventually he'll be able to move on and forget about it. But it was just too much to bear. Everyone at school aspired to be heroes, and because he was Endeavor's kid, the expectations were even heavier on him. And it's with this that we may once more look to the doctrine of all for one on what makes a villain. And the case of Toyah checks every single one of those boxes. An unhealthy household environment, coupled with quirk volatility, and mental instability. The whole family was left to witness as Toyah would overheat and flames would jettison from his head as in an instant he would rush towards baby Shoto with flames all around him, as Rei in the present would tell Endeavor that the one in the most pain wasn't him, that he wasn't the only one who turned their head from Toyah. And that was the chapter. And yeah, Rei is absolutely correct. She failed their son too. Her compliance is the very reason so many kids were born for the same ambition, and her passivity never did him any good. And I am willing to bet that more than just the abusive household and toxic environment that Endeavor facilitated for their family, Rei was haunted by her own guilt, her guilt that ate away at her. And that is a reason why she is now able to face Endeavor, because it was not just Endeavor who ruined them, she ruined them as well. She just didn't take as active of a role. And I am someone who firmly believes that indifference in many ways is a whole lot worse than hatred. And listen, that is not to detract from the faults of Endeavor at all. The man was absolutely wrong for pushing his own desires onto his children. And of course, as the first, Toyah suffered from that the most, with the exception of Shoto. Perhaps they could have done more for him in the way of quirk therapy or something, but more than that, what Toyah needed was love. The only affection his father ever really showed him was tied to heroics. And when he was telling Toyah to move on, it wasn't as if he himself was willing to move on with him, but rather move on without him. He sought to send Toyah elsewhere without walking that path himself, as a proper father would. And as he wanted to place these aspirations before him, it was Endeavor's responsibility to do more to amend his actions. With the community tab and over on social media, we have asked you guys in polls whether you forgive Endeavor or not. And for me, at least for now, Endeavor has not done enough to be forgiven, at least not in the case of Toyah. He's certainly begun to walk down that path for Shoto, but then again, that's for Shoto, his trophy child, within the last year only. And I don't see him trying to do that for Natsuo. And when it comes to Fuyumi, she's just like her mother, willing to put her grievances aside for the sake of her family. And maybe that's just me. I would love to hear your thoughts on all of this in the comments. There's always a whole lot to talk about with this series, and so if you'd like to be here for all that and more, be sure to subscribe to Plot Armor with notifications on. And if you want to go plus ultra, there's even more content than that over on our Patreon page, so give it a look. Because when it comes to bringing you some of the best My Hero Academia content on the platform, Plot Armor has you covered. As always, I am Slice of Otaku. Thank you all so much for watching and have an awesome day. I love you.